Hello, listeners, and welcome to The Floor, where we talk about fantasy and lore from the ground up. I'm your host, Aaron.
I'm Joe Bondowski.
And I'm Eli.
So in the very beginning of Neuromancer, he talks about Night City. He's not in Night City, but he does reference it.
Oh, I did not catch that bit. Nice.
Yeah.
And that is the city that 2077 will be in.
Yeah, and 2077 will be in Night City. So Night City is the corporate run city of the world. So essentially a guy just built this city from the ground up on some old ruins. And because it was almost a capitalistic venture to create Night City, the corporations rule the city. The actual government of Night City has so little funding and so little power that they are 100% dependent on the corporations for assistance in any kind of law enforcement, which has broken down the law enforcement in Night City to essentially just being who can pay enough money for whatever they want done. Then, of course, there's a very strong negative reaction from the population to this. And so Night City is lawless because the law is really about wealth, not actual fairness in the city. And so that kind of becomes the running current within the city. Like, it is lawless because the laws are not there for justice and fairness. They are there to serve the wealth.
Right. And he who has the gold makes the rules kind of situation.
That is Night City, because the corporations, they make the rules based on, what works best for them. And then rarely will you encounter true police in Night City. More, they're just corporate security officers, enforcing whatever they want, where they want. So, and Night City, of course, I believe it is in Carolina on the west coast of the United States. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised by that, particularly because there's such a strong Japanese vibe throughout Cyberpunk, right? Like they're often referred to as street samurais, these people who kind of run street ops and the borderline criminal activity. Right,
and usually are referring to somebody who would be using melee weapons and probably has like the reflexes.
Yeah, enhanced reflexes. They've got blades in their arm, maybe, or they might carry a sword. Yeah. Street samurai. But I believe sometimes it's just used as a generic term for any of kind of the street thugs who run. A lot of times you're even working for the corporations. You're just not an official person for them. You're doing all kinds of corporate espionage and stealing tech and information from different corporations for other corporations. And you're these street samurais.
So you're more of like a hourly wage guy instead of like getting days off and like a full dental plan kind of thing.
Yeah. More like you'd be taking jobs and
okay, like a temp.
Yeah, like a
really really messed up temp agency. Hey, this corporation needs you to go murder some people.
I think we'll just make a really quick reference to Dungeons and Dragons here. So we have Dungeons and Dragons first coming out in 1974, and it really introduces these very complex role-playing games in these fantasy worlds. And then using the world of Neuromancer, Cyberpunk 2013 is created in the 80s, right, Eli?
Yeah. 84 is when the first one comes out.
And that's Cyberpunk 2013?
Yeah, Cyberpunk 2013. And that one came out as, it was like 3 small booklets. It's like the player's handbook, the dungeon master, and then a run. And then it was just a few years later when he was able to come out with the 2020, and that was the main one for a while. That had a lot more meat to it, and eventually inspired Shadowrun, who kind of overshadows Cyberpunk 2020.
Yeah, now Shadowrun it's very much Cyberpunk, but it has one addition, and that is kind of the magic. And with that, the other races that come with it, trolls and elves. But otherwise, you're still very much in a world very similar to Cyberpunk.
And that one's not canon, correct?
Well, they're different worlds, right? Shadowrun is a whole different game, whole different rule set, everything. But as far as like the world, it's still corporate run, corporate police.
So in Cyberpunk, there's a whole history written about the world breaking down. In Shadowrun, what happens is everything's going pretty much how it was, and then one day there's a giant magical event, and a bunch of people mutate into the other races: orcs, trolls, elves, dwarves, as well as a bunch of volcanoes. Dragons come spewing out the top. A bunch of people gain the ability to have magic, and that's what sends this world into chaos. There's a giant event, whereas in the cyberpunk world, there's a year-by-year play of this going wrong, that going wrong, this going wrong.
Can you imagine just hanging out with your bros and then this huge apocalyptic event happens and everyone else gets magic and like turns into like dope wizards and you turn into some ugly ass troll? Like, can you imagine just pulling that short stick?
Oh yeah. And the trolls in Shadowrun, they're like big ogre-y, and they have horns.
But at the same time, like the advantage of the troll is trolls just don't die. They just don't die.
Yeah,
that's just universal.
Yeah, and like in Shadowrun, casting magic, you have a good chance of hurting yourself. So a lot of people pick a troll to cast magic because they won't kill themselves casting magic when they fail.
Okay.
Anyways,
that's smart. Well, because I know we did talk about when we were talking about Eberron. Trolls in there can't actually be killed by natural causes, right? They have to be killed by fire or whatever. And so that one was a really interesting episode.
Yeah, and it's different kind of troll, but under the same name and slightly the same guys, but
but the rule base for Shadowrun is very different. Like you don't have like a standard hit point model in Shadowrun. Like you can take like 4 light damage, like 2 medium damage, or 1 lethal damage, and then there's just the option to like reduce the type of damage you're taking. So Shadowrun is very different than your other role-playing games as far as like hit point models go.
It is, yeah. They wanted to make something completely different, and they did. And I've played it. There's a couple different versions of it, and it's really good.
Yeah, so like you said, I mean, Cyberpunk has definitely made it onto the big screen more as far as this really interesting world in which to have things happen. But as far as the game goes, Shadowrun has been far more beloved, and really interacted with.
Yeah, in the tabletop world for sure. And there's been people who have been doing the Shadowrun in the video games. There's been some good ones and there's been some bad ones as well.
Yeah.
But, and I think a lot of the cyberpunk world, it's been really interesting that its interaction with digital games, because, people are excited to put this cyberpunk world into a digital game, and it's just been progressing, and people have that, they're mesmerized by this a little bit because they're like, I'm kind of a part of this world because I'm using my computer and
that is a good point, right? Like interacting with the cyberpunk world through technology is kind of ideal.
Yeah, like it's romanticized, I think. What I mean? Yeah. And there's just something magical there, I think, with that, and I think that's part of why people are so excited for Cyberpunk 2077. Is
Oh, sorry, I finished that.
No, go ahead.
I've also heard from the articles that there are people who are excited about the amount of customization going on that you can do to your character. You guys heard about this?
Yeah.
You will be able to customize your genitalia.
Or remove it completely.
But why would you do that when you can put a cannon down there? It's like that just seems more efficient if you get caught.
Yeah, so transhumanism is definitely a big part of Cyberpunk. This ability to just modify the human body to do things beyond what it could normally do.
Like there's going to be armor that you could implant into yourself that is like retractable. So it's not always up front. It can like pop out of you and assemble. And gangs, they'll usually have like a similar cybernetic. Like there might be a gang and they all have jumping legs, where a 15-foot jump from a standing position is something they can all do.
Right. Yeah, and definitely, like, if you've seen, the gameplay trailers or the just the video releases and teasers, you see like the main character, he's got these huge blades that just come out of his arms, so that kind of transhumanism there. So Eli, I thought I'd ask you. I'm not 100% sure. Do we see a more of a basic genetic transmutation a lot in Cyberpunk, or is it all more technological, like a gene mutation to give you something? Do we see that in Cyberpunk very often?
No. Now, they might pull that out in 2077. They are coming out with an RPG tabletop as well on the same date, and that's going to be called Cyberpunk Red. And that's going to give us the history that catches us up to 2077.
Oh, nice.
But that comes out on the same day.
So what you're saying is we need to play that game.
Yeah. Well, I want to just dive into those books for sure. So I think that one is more meant to be played through the era of, I believe it's 2035 and 2077, whereas the Cyberpunk 2077 will be the year 2077.
Right.
Okay. So it's preemptive.
Right. You could call it the present if you were, in the game. Okay.
Well, I'm going to call whichever game we play when we do the tabletop runs, I'm calling that the present until we play the next one.
Sounds good.
We are running out of time, but I do feel it is imperative to ask you guys, if you were able to augment your bodies, what would you add?
If we had a Matrix, a head jack to get into the Matrix would be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm already a guy who walks around with a Bluetooth so I can listen to podcasts and audiobooks. So I would just just take that to the next level. Some kind of implant to just be able to access the whole web and everything, while I'm walking around, not just be able to tap into an audiobook, but be able to just be like, I'm waiting in the dentist office, be like, hey, read me this page on the web as I'm sitting here.
Yeah, and Elon Musk is working. I forget what his technology he's working on right now, but he's trying to create something where we can interact with our information at higher speeds. And it is a head jack that he's working on.
It is a head jack.
Yeah.
I'm over here wanting to get a new arm so I can grapple hook to things and run twice as fast with augmented legs. And you guys are like, I just want to be uploaded to the Matrix. I'm like, there's 3 movies as to why you shouldn't. Come on, guys.
I think before we go, we definitely should list out some of the good media here, but we do need to talk about the Matrix, just because this is clearly, built off of this idea in Neuromancer, the Matrix, right? This virtual reality that people tap into that is preferable to reality. And that's exactly what the Matrix is. The difference is that in the Matrix, they're forced into there as slaves, whereas in Cyberpunk, they go there because it's just so much better than the real world. Mm-hmm. And you see this exact same thing played out in, Ready Player One, right? This virtual world they tap into is better than the real world. So that's where everybody goes.
Mm-hmm. And real quick, in Shadowrun, they have one that they call Better Than Life. So it's like when you jack into that one, not only is life so much better, it's actually simulating drugs in your brain so that you're on this big euphoric feeling. And when they call it better than life, they are meaning it in a way that's talking down about it because it's addictive and people will waste away just trying to live in the better than life matrix. I just wanted to put that in there as things people have expounded, as well as there's going to be something that'll come up in Cyberpunk called a brain dance, which you kind of put somebody into a loop and then turn off the loop, and it's kind of almost like a torture device, but a way to also mitigate prisoners. for overcrowded prisons, so you can just put them in a brain dance, so that they don't have to like walk around, and you can just leave them somewhere and not have to worry about them.
All right, yeah. So let me give you. So if you want to really get ready for Cyberpunk, here's a list of some movies and TV shows and books that you can check out. Of course, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Neuromancer, and in fact, Neuromancer is part of a whole trilogy, so you can check out those to really get yourself ready. The short story you mentioned, what was that, Eli?
I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison.
Yeah, so there you go. So some movies you can check out. Of course, we mentioned Blade Runner, and we really recommend pay attention to the environment of Blade Runner, because that's very much where you're going to be stepping into in Cyberpunk 2077. Judge Dredd, and then, of course, Dredd. Those are both very much those Cyberpunk worlds as well. Alita Battle Angel is definitely a Cyberpunk world.
I haven't seen that one yet.
And then, of course, RoboCop, yeah. Altered Carbon, that's two. They've got 2 seasons on Netflix there, and Altered Carbon is very much built on the idea that someone can augment themselves to the point that it's more of just a conscious that slips in and out. So within Neuromancer, we get this first reference to the ghost in the machine. This is someone who's had their consciousness digitized to the point that it now exists in the matrix or cyberspace or the internet, whatever you want to refer to it as. And then, of course, if there is an android with a strong enough processor, it can then be put into the android and they can function there. And so you'll get ghosts in the machine. There are these ghosts in the matrix that are just leftover consciousness that people have uploaded there and still continue to interact with the world. And then, of course, then those ghosts can be put into android bodies as well. Definitely the idea that spawns Altered Carbon. Yeah, go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, with Altered Carbon, they're not necessarily machines. Machines are a possible version, but there's also grown biological bodies. And as well as like the economic disparity, people get put into horrible bodies.
Yeah, like well, not only that, but I mean, like, people can have their bodies essentially sold out from under them, and someone else will take it over.
That's right. Yeah.
That sounds super fun. Let's do that.
Let's do that. So Altered Carbon, like, it's definitely a cyberpunk world, but it's built off of this idea of the ghost in the machine, but it's not quite the same. They have this very special piece of alien tech that they use to store human consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so those are just some pieces of media you can hit up to really get ready for Cyberpunk 2077. And so we're super excited about it. We doing the research for this. It was just really interesting to see kind of the through line of some of these ideas and technology as they started out as just books being written by authors, and then evolved into these role playing games, and eventually these digital games that could be played. And how much that playing a digital game of Cyberpunk is very this kind of meta experience.
And I would even say a lot of it has inspired technology that people have worked towards. The same way Star Trek has inspired some technology that we have today as well.
I think that's our intro to Cyberpunk. Going forward, we'll dig deep into the history and then some of the lore and events leading up to Cyberpunk 2077 that we can get our hands on until the release of Cyberpunk Red. Of course, so we would love it if you would head over to our Patreon if you want to support the show. Give us a tip because you think we're doing a good job here. And, just put it all in our jar. That's patreon.com/floor, spelled FOFLORE, fantasy and lore. That's patreon.com/floor, fantasy and lore. And then, of course, if things are tight and you just, we really just can't afford it, then if you could just leave us a review, or maybe if you see one of our ads in Facebook or other social medias, just like it, share it, add it, just anything to kind of tell other people about this. If you're enjoying the show, then guaranteed there's other people out there who's going to enjoy it as well. Just be able to get the lore and the background of some of these games, because I always enjoy them more when I have that. Tell your friends, and if there's anything you think we missed, go ahead and email us. Send us an email at floor, spelled FLORE.fantasylore@gmail.com. That's floor.fantasylore@gmail.com. And of course, you can find us on Facebook, Floor Fantasy and Lore, and you can leave us a message there as well. Thanks for listening. So have you ever seen the oatmeal cartoon about the Game of Thrones? This guy, he really wants to watch Game of Thrones. And for a moment, he considers getting the torrent. But then his conscience kicks in and be like, no, these are actors and artists and writers and creators, and they're working hard to create this awesome thing that people can enjoy. And he's like, you're right. I should support it. So he goes to Amazon and he looks and he can't rent it and he can't buy it. And he goes to Netflix and he goes to Hulu. And he goes everywhere, all over the internet. And so eventually he goes to HBO specifically, but because of the country he lives in, he can't even get HBO. So he literally cannot buy the Game of Thrones. So he downloads the torrent. That's not a problem with Floor. If you want to support us, just go to the Patreon and you can join just at that $1 level. If some of the other perks appear to you at the higher tier, go higher. But just you can support us just like he was trying to but couldn't.
And now we have given you the floor and foundation. Now go build your own story.